What is up, my peeps? We are back up in this. Welcome back to the channel. If you wouldn't mind and you enjoy a person who has shared some of the similar struggles of what you have in past and current drug addiction and is now living a completely different life and is a grateful, blessed person to have made it through everything that I've gone through in regards to drug addiction and drug use, subscribe to the channel. You know, this is a free service. You don't have to physically pay anything, but don't be that person that takes the candy from the jar at the cash register and then when no one's looking, sticks the candy in your pocket and walks out. Be an honorable, integrous individual. And if you have watched more, you know, if you're just happening upon my video and you've not watched any of my videos yet, first one's free, man. First one's free. Give you a pass, see if you like it. But if you've watched 2 of them, if you've watched 3 of them, you know, if you're coming back saying to yourself, I don't know why, but I just want to hear what kind of fucked up stuff this guy has to tell me next. And if that's you and you're a returning user, all I ask is just hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you can know when I'm posting another video. And I'm going to get right down to it. So I tell stories on here about past, current drug addiction. You know, a lot of the things that I talk about are simply behavioral red flags that I might have displayed. Some of them may sound similar to behavioral red flags that you displayed in your earlier life, maybe perhaps even before you became a drug addict. Because as you know, a lot of times the addictive behaviors precede, not proceed, precede the actual drug use, right? In other words, a lot of times you're doing risky and stupid things in life before you ever even start using a substance, right? But then once you use the substance, then from there it becomes a consistent, almost dosing to yourself, of yourself, and that's when, you know, the drug addiction itself rears its head, right? So what I'm going to talk about today, and I know I've got some crazy stories, man. I've lived a life, you know, I've lived a life, and I haven't even begun to scratch the surface. But this first story I'm going to share with you is one that was probably my first indication, real indication that you love narcotics. You love opiates, man. You know, if there is any one point in my life that I can point to and say, hey, if I would have had the forethought then, if I would have been able to tell the future at this particular time, this would have been the time where I would have said, you know what? I can see myself doing this 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, 25 years from now, right? And before I get started, if this is your first time watching my video, you know, the only thing I do these days is I take a moderate amount of kratom daily, about the same amount every day. I don't do anything else. I have at one point, but not anymore, been addicted to alcohol, weed, basically a poly addict. Anything that causes a psychoactive response in my brain, I've messed around with. So alcohol, weed, I smoked cigarettes, Adderall, Ritalin, other things I've kind of just messed around with a handful of times. But basically this story that I'm going to tell you is an indication of, yeah, you're probably going to end up loving narcotics all of your life, right? And the story starts like this. I'm a 20-year-old kid, and like many kids who are 20 years old, my wisdom teeth start coming in, right? You know, These teeth that are in the back here that are behind your molars, those teeth that a lot of people find they just don't have room in their mouths for. So a lot of people need to get them cut out and removed. Well, I was no exception. My dentist had noticed that my wisdom teeth were coming in. There wasn't going to be enough space for them. They were causing me some pain and causing me some issues. And so we made plans to get my wisdom teeth cut out. Now, let me set this up for you. Cutting out of wisdom teeth is one of those things where, at least at this time, I don't know about now, but at least at this time, dentists could legally potentially cut out your wisdom teeth for you, right? But even at this time, which would have been back in maybe 1996, something like that, even at this time, it was not common. It's one of those things that typically a dentist would defer you or refer you to an oral surgeon. Somebody who has thousands and thousands of hours of experience cutting around in people's mouths, right? You want, anytime there's a scalpel and removing anything involved, you typically want someone who has a lot of experience doing so, holding that scalpel, right? Okay, so I had a dentist at the time, and I am going to say this guy's name because my parents ended up writing a very strongly worded letter to this individual, and this individual ended up compensating me some money because of this experience that I went through. Okay, so this dentist, this selfish ass dentist named Dr. Labisher, at this time, was going to do this procedure for me. Now, did he all the time cut out people's wisdom teeth? No, he did not. This is something he actually did on a more rare basis. But if he was the one that did this surgery and did this procedure, he was the one that could bill insurance and then collect the money for having done said procedure, right? So basically, this dentist, even though he's used to doing smaller things like a smaller sort of tooth extraction, fillings, caps, crowns, all this stuff, this guy agrees to do something that he is not proficient at doing. Now, I'm saying this all in hindsight now, as a man who's looking back on this experience, because at the time, you trust doctors. You trust your dentist. If your dentist says that he can cut out your wisdom teeth, no problem. All right, that's cool, yeah. Makes it easier. I come here, once every 6 months anyway to get my teeth cleaned. I mean, I already know where the office is. Let's just do it that way. So I go in and I get 2 of my wisdom teeth cut out, and the reason they did that, they only do one side at a time, and they do that so that when you get this side cut out, the right side, you will have the left side that you can chew your food on while your right side heals up. And then they'll bring you back at a later date. Then once the right side is healed up, they'll take out the wisdom teeth on the left side. So then you have your right side to chew on. Is it making sense? Okay. So I go in, get one side removed. No problems whatsoever. I guess it's several weeks later, maybe a month later, something like that. After everything had healed up on this side, I go in and I get the other side, which is the left side, removed, right? Okay, so get the wisdom teeth removed, come home, everything's fine the first night, okay? And I get home, and the very next day, I've had my wisdom teeth cut out, so obviously I'm out of work for a couple of days, just kind of sitting at home healing up or whatever. And I'm sitting at home, all of a sudden I'm like, my mouth's bleeding. What's going on? And then literally no sooner than I had the thought, I feel liquid starting to fill up in the back corner of my mouth. So I, go get, like a paper towel or whatever, I'm bleeding. I noticed that I'm bleeding from the area where I got this wisdom teeth removed, specifically the upper side. And it's one of those where I realize that I'm bleeding, and no more than 60 seconds after first realizing initially that I'm bleeding, I realize that I'm bleeding rather heavily. Okay? And so obviously this is concerning. Fortunately, this happened on a weekend, right? So because my parents were still working at the time, during the week would have been home by myself, right? So luckily my parents were home. Well, they get on and they do an emergency call to Dr. Labisher, the dentist who actually extracted my teeth, right? They're like, hey, we got a problem. Corey's mouth started bleeding. Now, I want to remind you, this is not the day of. This is not, oh, you come home and you still got a little oozing going on. No, this is well over 24 hours after the procedure. There should be no bleeding taking place whatsoever. And this isn't oozing. This is the dam busted. And all of a sudden, now every time I spit the blood out, my mouth is filling up with blood within 5 or 10 seconds. Okay? So this is, some pretty heavy bleeding, right? So they call the doctor. He like in a haste, tells them, meet me at the dentist office where I got this done, right? So he comes in on a Saturday. Dentists don't work on Saturdays, right? He comes in, and my parents rush me there, go in. He goes in, he does another procedure to, stitch up my mouth, right? Everything's good. According to him, it's rare that something like this would happen, but all good now, right? Everything's good. I leave there thinking, okay, well, that was close. That sucked, right? But go home thinking that everything's taken care of. So I get home, and I go to bed that night, and probably about 2, 3 in the morning, something wakes me up. And when I wake up, I notice there's a fluid in the back of my throat. I swallow it. And then I'm like, I run my tongue across it. 10 seconds later, the whole left side of my mouth is full again. So I get up, run into the bathroom, turn on the light, and I look in the mirror, and I open my mouth, and blood just pours out of my mouth. It's bleeding again, right? For a second time. I'm not talking about spotting. I'm not talking about you take a little cloth and put it back there and you tap, tap, tap on it and there's a little bit of blood. No, I'm talking about my mouth is filling up with blood. I'm spitting it out, probably an ounce or two at a time. And then as soon as I spit it out, I can already feel my mouth filling up with blood again. Okay? This is a problem, right? So the second time that this happens, again, call Dr. Labisher in the middle of the night, okay? He's like, meet me at Wake Medical Center. So Wake Medical Center, I lived in Zebulon, North Carolina at this time. Wake Medical Center is in Raleigh. It's a good 30 minutes away. And it's one of those things where my parents were like, should we call the EMS, whatever. He was like, no, if you can drive, it's probably quicker just to go ahead and get him in the car and just meet me there. I'll meet you there. Okay? So we rush to Wake Medical Center. They put me in, they literally do not have space for this man. Okay? He's called them in an emergency situation, and they basically had me, and I'm not even playing, it wasn't a broom closet, but it was a side room like that it was a broom closet. Okay? I'm telling you, you can't make this shit up. And my brother can attest to this. So they get me in there. He does not have a helper. Okay? It's just him. And what is happening is, as this is happening, instead of referring me to a professional, an oral surgeon, a person who can actually get this done and taken care of, this guy is, his pride and his fear of getting in trouble for messing me up is taking over. And he's putting a 20-year-old kid's life at risk because of this sense of ego and pride that this man has. So we go there, they put me in this broom closet, and they're working on my mouth, right? When I tell you that they had my brother, my older brother, who had ridden to the hospital with us, because at this point, you know, my family's concerned, right? Like, I had already lost like a decent amount of blood, right? And so at this point, my family's pretty concerned. So my brother's in there. They have my brother, who is not a medical professional at all, holding a light so that this man can see into my mouth and try to stitch me up. And when I tell you that this happened, like this went on for probably an hour and a half, and it became obvious that this man was really struggling, trying to fix this, this split that had kept opening up, right? And he was struggling. He was struggling to do it. I was losing blood. And this happened, you know, they worked on me for probably an hour or two, to a point where I literally got to a point of frustration where I sat up on the hospital bed and was just like crying profusely. Like, I thought I was gonna die, dude. I thought I was gonna die. And I still remember my brother standing there. It's okay, bro, you know, like rubbing my back, like, please lay down. He's got to get this taken care of. He's got to get this, trying to be, you know, remain calm. Well, finally, this night, in the broom closet, with my brother holding the light so that this man could see to work inside my mouth, this same dentist that fucked me up in the beginning, finally gets the bleeding to stop, okay? And they give me some Demerol, and I get discharged from the hospital. So, by the way, Demerol, I've only had Demerol one time. That is a fucked up medication. I remember one or two things about the ride home that night, and I literally remember I was laying down in the back seat, and I remember waking up. So, what? No, that's seriously how I sounded. I remember like kind of waking up from just being passed out from this Demerol, and so okay, like almost like I was speaking in tongues, like I wasn't even making any sense. And you know, it's something my family told me about later on, but I have like little tiny memories from it. Okay, so go home, right? This same dentist who fucked my mouth up from the beginning has now done the initial surgery. We called, told him my mouth was bleeding profusely again, brought me back into the dentist office, sewn me up for a second time, right? Went home. That same night, it burst again. I started bleeding profusely again. He meets me at Wake Medical Center, the hospital, 30 minutes away. Spend 2 hours in a broom closet with my brother holding the light. He finally gets me stitched up again, shoots me up with Demerol, sends me home. All right. So for the next 3, 4, 5 days, I'm good, right? And so I'm thinking, you know, good, we're straight, we're good now. The only thing that I had that concerned me was the pressure and the pain from back here just didn't seem to want to go away, you know, and I felt like this is something that should have started to ease up sooner as everything started to heal, right? But it's one of those things where when you have 3 surgeries on your mouth within a given week period, you know, I'm just thinking, oh, it's just the trauma. You know, I had a lot of trauma to my mouth. I mean, that's the reason it feels the way it does. You know, we didn't think too much about it. So I go for 3 or 4 days. Everything's fine. And at this point, I've lost a decent amount of blood. You know, I've already started to lose some weight. I've lost probably 5 to 10 pounds at this point. Um, and I'm at home for several days, sitting at home, and all of a sudden, I'm like, no, no. And so at this point, I'm literally like traumatized by this, okay? As a 20-year-old kid, I'm literally traumatized by this series of events that I have incurred, right? And it starts bleeding again. Guess what? This time, my parents are at work. I'm at home by myself, okay? And so I call mom and I tell her it's bleeding again. It's bleeding again. My mom flips her shit, and she hangs up. She was like, "I'm calling 911. I'm calling out." So my mom hangs up, calls 911. The ambulance shows up. I walk outside. I'm able to walk outside. I walk outside. I'm bleeding. They're like, "What happened? What happened?" Trying to get me to tell them what happened. I was like, "Where do I freaking start? What happened? Where do I start?" So they get me in the ambulance, drive me all the way 30 minutes. And let me remind you, the 3 times that this has happened now, each time that this has happened, I'm bleeding. I'm losing blood. I'm bleeding, right? And I had lost enough blood at this point where literally I looked pale from it, okay? I had lost a large amount of blood just through my mouth. So they call an orthodontist. At this point, my parents are like, fuck the dentist. Get him to a hospital, get him to an oral surgeon so we can get this taken care of. So they take me all the way to the oral surgeon in Raleigh near Wake Medical Center, where I was in the broom closet. And they get me in there, and they literally had to pull a surgeon and call a surgeon who was not on duty. They had to call him in. He had to rush to the oral surgeon's office, and he went in there, and I could feel him like pushing down on me like this, just trying to like get in there and like stop this bleeding, because this was no leakage. It was profusely bleeding, right? And they were aware that at this point I had lost a decent amount of blood. So it was getting serious, bro. It was getting serious. And I remember that this oral surgeon going in there, and I could just feel the seriousness of this situation by the way he was pressing down into my mouth, trying to get, control of this bleeding. So the first time I see the oral surgeon, it's taken care of. It's done. It's fixed. Never at any point after that did I have any trouble with this mouth. But I lost over this period of time, and of course I was out of work for about a month and a half with this, recovering from this instance, right? And I lost about 15 pounds. I went down from 185 to right around 170. This is a 20-year-old kid, and I wasn't being active. I was sitting around healing. So that should let you know, how much this affected me. And I wasn't able to really eat either, because my mouth was in such shambles for, the couple of weeks that I went through this ordeal. So my parents ended up writing this individual, this dentist, a very strongly worded letter, and basically said to him, if you don't give my son some compensation, pay for all his medical expenses, and give him some compensation for pain and suffering, we are suing the fuck out of your ass, basically, is what the letter said. And so he did. He did. He paid for all of my medical expenses, and then I ended up, which I should have gotten more than this, to be honest with you, but then I ended up getting like 6 or 7 grand or something from him. I actually paid off my little car with it and everything. And this was for compensation of what I had gone through, right? So during this process, obviously I was on some pain medication, right? And this was my first experience with having like Vicodin or something on a regular basis. So I had originally gotten it from the dentist who screwed my mouth up. And then once that was over with, I ended up from the oral surgeon getting some more, and because of the ordeal I went through, I ended up being on Vicodin for probably a good month and a half, just healing up from this ongoing ordeal, right? And there was some friends of mine. There was a family who were friends of our family, and there was a girl, the daughter. I went to high school with her. Okay, she was a few years younger than me. She liked me a lot, and it was one of those things where this girl always had a crush on me. And as much as she was just a sweet person, and as much as I loved her family, right? I just didn't like her in that way. It was one of those where I just couldn't bring myself to really feel about her anything other than just like a friendship, right? I thought of her as a friend. Um, and during that time, because my parents were so terrified, that I had gone home 3 different times, and 3 different times, this had started bleeding again. So let me cut back real quick. This dentist had cut an artery in my mouth up in the socket from where the tooth came from. The dentist had cut an artery, right? And so that's where the bleeding was coming from. What was happening is he had cut this artery up in there, and he was sewing the skin in my gums over the top of it, but then the blood was still coming from the artery. And then it was getting to this tipping point to where eventually, once enough blood was gathering, that's the pressure I was feeling. Once enough blood gathered in there, it was bursting the stitch from where he was stitched. It just idiotic. This man was idiotic, right? And it was all because of his pride and ego that he didn't just send me to an oral surgeon the very first time that this thing ruptured and started bleeding, right? And that's one of the things that made my parents so mad. Like, you could have killed my fucking son, you jackass. You should have just knew when you were whipped and that you couldn't handle it and sent him somewhere. But anyway, I'm getting off. I don't want the time to run out on me. All right, so I'm on Vicodin, and because my parents were scared to leave me alone at this point, and they still had jobs to do, they still had to work, they sent me this, because this was during the summer as well, right? And so they sent me to this friend of mine, the girl I was talking about, and her family was all good friends of ours. They sent me here to stay during the day because they didn't want me by myself. Because the last time I was by myself at home, I had to call 911 and get the ambulance to take me to the hospital, to the oral surgeon, right? And so I go over there and stay. And remember I told you I didn't like this girl? That was before I was on Vicodin. After being there for a couple of days high on Vicodin, I was like, huh, yeah, she, you know what, she's not that bad. I started kind of looking at her a little different, like, maybe I can get with this, and so during this time, I actually started kind of not dating, but seeing this girl a little bit. And once everything healed up, and we knew that everything's healed, no more issues, with my mouth, and then once the Vicodin ran out, I was kind of like, sorry, you're just a friend. I really didn't like you like that. So basically, what I'm saying is, under the influence of Vicodin, I kind of started liking this girl and saw her as more than just a friend, kind of under false pretenses, right? And that's the first time in my life where this Vicodin's a beast. This Vicodin is a beast for me, because I had never had anything like that, and it made me feel so freaking good that any doubts I had about this girl, and I knew that she liked me, and she had expressed it to me, and even her mother had expressed it to my mother, that this girl liked me a lot, and I just never was interested until I was at her house for a month straight on Vicodin every day. And I then became interested, right? But as soon as the Vicodin ran out, I was kind of like, sorry, psych, I was kidding. I know that's messed up. It's so messed up, but that just goes to show you, what kind of euphoria and mood lifting properties that these narcotics have. And as a young kid who had never experienced anything like that, you know, I thought it was just the way I was feeling. Like, I really didn't like her like that. I just felt freaking good. It probably wouldn't even have mattered who it was. You know, I liked everything and everybody at that time in my life. And I knew at that moment that, you know, Narcotics was where it was at for me. And that's not necessarily when I got hooked on them, because, you know, a drug addiction is not a straight on progression. It's not a linear progression. You know, it's a little bit of this, then a little bit of this, or maybe a little bit of this, and then you go back up. And that's what it was for me too. So it didn't actually get hooked on them until some years later. But that being my first experience of it let me know that, yeah, if I ever get a steady supply of these, it's going to be a problem, right? But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that story, as crazy as it is. I'm lucky to still be here, and I meant that when I said it. But like the video, subscribe to the channel, and this is Corey. I'll see you guys next time. All right, peace.